John Adams famously said that minds are like old horses. You have to exercise them regularly to keep them in good working order. And it seems that Neil Young has decided to crank up that specific engine for this, his 41st album, if I'm not mistaken. But the question we need to ask ourselves is it any good? Well, let's find out, shall we? Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of New Album Review, and today we're looking at Neil Young's The Barn, which was released I think December last year. I'm a bit late to the party with this one, unfortunately. If you're new to my channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that bell, and do check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done here at Classic Album Review. So Neil Young has recorded this album, The Barn. He's also recruited Nils Lofgren to help it along. For me, Young's later albums are a bit of a mixed bag, ranging from the bloody awful to this kind of hypnotic musical meandering, from deeply felt lyrical meditations on love and aging like the wonderful Ramada Inn from Psychedelic Pill, to numbers that strain and stretch under the weight of his political activism. As regards a lot of these albums, it seems that roughness and sprawl is the order of the day. I must admit I'm probably the only one out there that finds the Americana album truly dreadful, amateurish even, and I have to say it a wasted opportunity. But this one has really taken me by surprise. It actually consists of 10 songs. It seems that some thought or writing process was employed before they recorded them. They're coherent numbers that reflect upon love and aging, and they possess that snarls of six-string authority, according to The Guardian. This record still has that trademark crazy horse grungy growl, so to speak, raucous and tuneful, replete with equine grace. In fact, he sings at one point in Song of Seasons, the horses gait in the rhythm I feel somehow and the melody I play. I mean, if you like the stylized racket of this band, I think you'll enjoy this album. It's an interesting premise, as a lot of these songs are thrashed out in this drafty outbuilding, and the ambience of the place certainly pervades these songs, I think. Emily Dickinson said, "Nature does not knock, and yet does not intrude." And for many, as with the Colorado album, the setting very much is a part of the music. Of course, Crazy Horse have changed shape recently, with Frank Poncho San Pedro retiring, but Nils Lofgren, who played with Crazy Horse in the early 70s, I believe, before adding his distinctive voice, the thrum of the E Street Band, has rejoined. And I think his inclusion on this album adds nuance and colour to the proceedings. And there's plenty of guitar growl, especially on tracks like Human Race, which imagines the blasted heath of fires and floods that gas-guzzling humanity is leaving in its wake. One of the biggest contributions Nils Lofgren makes to this album is the honky-tonk piano and the accordion, which I believe he plays. It lends to this music what one critic has described as a shimmying prettiness, one that has added something to the Crazy Horse palette beyond the powder burns of cranked up amps and feedback drenched jams. And although this album does have more nuance and colour, as I've said, it is at the expense of those meandering long guitar exchanges. Some might feel that's definitely a good thing. The piano adds nuance and voice, adding to the melancholy of these numbers, especially when combined with the breathy wheeze of the harmonica. Heading West is interesting when it galumphs along like some old cart horse. Nevertheless, it's quite a chirpy number, with Young's guitar taking the centre stage here. It's a number which recalls Young's idyllic childhood and uses the well-furrowed analogy of kind of a journey to map out key moments. And Lofgren's insouciant playing on this adds to the momentum and breeziness of this number. Of course, he touches upon his relationship with Daryl Hannah in songs like A Shape of You. And the song Don't Forget Love is uplifting, partly helped along by the ballooning falsetto, which really gives this message wings, I think. There are some interesting musings amongst the stoked embers of these numbers, including They Might Be Lost, which sees Neil Young pacing his porch waiting for a couple of guys in a delivery truck to bring his gear over. He whiles away the time reminiscing about the old days through the smoke that I burn. Those spliffs will do it for you every time. I love the lyric, the jury is out on the old days, you know, the judgment is soon coming down. I can't remember what it was that I knew. It seems to be a song about not knowing as he makes his transition in his life, and the band are quite poignant as well. providing appropriate backing to this reminiscing, this ache. In fact, there's a wonderful quote in The Guardian, if you'll forgive me for quoting: Young's warm harmonica and Lofgren's discreet keys having their own quiet conversation as the rhythm section of Ralph Molina and Billy Talbot bears a steady, unobtrusive witness to Young's thousand-yard stare. One of the most prevalent criticisms of Young's later material is his decision to prioritise immediacy over craft, a sense that the urgency of the message seems to be more important than the music itself. And this no doubt gives a lot of his later albums a kind of tossed out feel. The general consensus, of course, is first thought, best thought, and there doesn't seem to be any creative filter employed in some of it, no sort of quality control at times. That's just my opinion anyway. These songs have an archetypal 3-chord progression, these shaggy, weed-drenched musings on the minutiae of life, which I think prompts people to see things as far more significant than they really are. It's indicative of someone my father might describe as having way too much time and love to burn. In fact, I'm surprised we haven't had an album from Neil Young where he ponders the enormity of his morning dump, no doubt to a backdrop of some feedback-drenched soundtrack provided by Crazy Horse. If I may quote Pitchfork, Barn, as on many of the recent predecessors, the tunes meander along the most obvious roots of the chords that underpin them, rarely going anywhere in particular and almost never taking the sorts of audacious twists that might lodge them in your heart and mind. Nevertheless, there is always an epiphany at the end of a joint, I feel. I think there's a lot of great stuff on this record. I don't totally agree with Pitchfork's assessment here. And like a lot of Young's albums, it seems to reveal a troubled rapport with nostalgia, where the past often shines a very dimmed spotlight on the present. Anyway, if you'll forgive me for referring to my notes, I'd like to talk about some of the songs on this record. For example, Song of Seasons starts with that mournful wheeze on the harmonica, of course paired beautifully with the sounds of an accordion. It gives the whole thing a very plaintive folk feel from the get-go. Circa Harvest, in fact, Harvest or Harvest Moon, with its gently acoustic strum platforming what appears to be a song about the passing of time. And of course he uses the seasons to draw this analogy between the natural world and the passing of a life. I love the line where he describes the geese as honkers flying low above the waves. It has a tone of gathering old friends on the porch, no doubt, still waiting for that truck to arrive. Heading west, familiar plugged-in grind we expect from Crazy Horse. We can all do with a bit of that. Interesting look at his life explored through the metaphor of a journey, as I've said. It has an infectious chorus, I certainly give it that. These songs, I don't know, I think they have a structure which is makes them much more rewarding for the listener. And there was certainly a theme explored on this album that seems to be a sense of restlessness, moving on perhaps. Under this you'll get remembrances of first guitars purchased and pulling the old wagon through the neighbourhood. Change Ain't Gonna, a bluesy track with a strong ecological theme. Wouldn't expect anything else from Neil Young. A strong harmonica line throughout. Apparently he's addressing people who cling to an idolised history despite the desperate need for progress. The tonal balance of this one is almost reminiscent of the Greendale album, I think. Canerican is an interesting one. Perhaps the subtext here is the idea of nationhood as being something that can be divisive. Great tune with a distorted thrum. The guitar was Young muses on political changes and the idea of nationality and identity in modern America. Great chugging guitars throughout and some really nice melodic lines. We get the lyric, I am all colours is what I am. It kind of gives you an idea of where Young is going with this one. Shape of You is an acoustic bluesy strum, I think dedicated to Daryl Hannah. They Might Be Lost, we've already spoken about this one. It's a slow meditative number about moving on, I think, literally and figuratively as well. His voice is a hushed and subdued quality underpinning the reflective mood of this song. It has a dreamlike quality to it as well, reminiscent of something like Nashville Skyline. The Human Race is a spiky track very much about humanity and the world at large, I think. The next generation will be the children of the fires and floods. Very apocalyptic language he uses in this one. We can almost hear Greta Thunberg's Nordic Wine from the Wings as Neil sings, who's going to save the children today's people have left behind? But also a musing on climate change, no doubt. Composers Neil's wandering over to the barn, tumbling through the years, lovely delicate piano phrasing at the start of this one. Feels like a gentle breeze after all that apocalyptic portent of the previous number, and the piano gives it an uplifting, chiming quality. And we get welcomed back. I love the guitar sound at the start of this. Reminds me of a higher, punctuated by some chiming lead guitar phrases that add an almost ethereal, almost gloomy vibe to this number. And don't forget love, a gentle number that opines all you need is love. A simple but poignant message in our increasingly polarised and fractured world, I think. Overall, I have to say, I rather liked this album. I've listened to it 2 or 3 times. I think it's a much better album than the one that precedes it, in my opinion. Anyway, there we have it, Neil Young's The Barn. Do check out some of the videos that are now appearing up here. And I urge you to leave some comments below if you've bought this album, listen to it, let me know what you think of it. Other than that, I hope you're all well, staying safe, warm. More importantly, that you keep listening.